Welcome to the Point Sports Report. I'm Rob McDonald. This is week 5, I believe now, of the college football season. I'm kind of a little bit lost. I know I should be on that top of that a little bit better. But I think it's week 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm joined by Michael and Marcus. How you guys doing?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good, Ryan. You know, I saw someone release a poll. I think it was Bleacher Report. They said week 5, and so I got really confused because everyone else's polls say week 4. So I'm kind of with you on that one. And if you count the Cal Hawaii game in Australia, it technically is week 5, but just helping
Okay,
out
thanks.
there.
I just went to ESPN to look it up. We are on week 5, so there we go. It's official, week 5, guys. Looking back at week 4, there were a lot of anticipated matchups and some really good-looking games, and when it got down to it, at the end of the day, very few really good games. Marcus, what was your take of that week, and were there good games that we were just, maybe, we're getting to become a little bit too greedy in what we consider a good game?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think because we've been so spoiled the first couple of weeks with, the opening week was just ridiculous. It was jam-packed full of amazing games. The next couple weeks the lineup didn't seem as great, but looking back on actually watching the games, there are some phenomenal games just from an entertainment perspective. But last week, it was kind of boring. Being a Boise State fan, they usually play at 8:15, 8:30 at night, so I'm usually anticipating that the whole day, and so I'll watch a lot of the games, but they played at 1:30 Mountain Time last week, and so some of the other games I kind of lost interest in pretty quickly. But there were some good games. I mean, USC, almost had Utah in Salt Lake. Georgia Tech played all right against Clemson. I mean, they didn't get blown out, but it wasn't a super close game either. UCLA held on to Stanford quite a bit. It came down to the wire there. And, Wisconsin beat Michigan State. So there's a couple of decent games. Nothing too thrilling, but, it's college football. There's always going to be something going on. There's going to be some entertainment factor. I just think it was a little weak last week compared to the weeks before that.
I mean, end of the day, I guess what we're looking at is how many ranked matchups, because we've in the last year, 2 years, we can go into weeks where we have one ranked matchup, or even somewhere there aren't ranked matchups at all. I think we still had 4 or 5 at least last week, and if they weren't ranked, they were right there on the cusp. We started out last week with Utah with a final, 14 points in the fourth quarter and comeback win over USC. We had some other good games in this as well, as you said, Stanford and UCLA, Washington going to overtime. Texas A&M and Arkansas was kind of a battle for a while. Florida State pulled away pretty early. Tennessee-Florida, probably the best game of the weekend. Another delay at the Baylor game against Oklahoma State. Another delay there for Oklahoma State in back-to-back games with lightning delays. Auburn beating LSU and saying goodbye to Les Miles. But, I mean, that's just a couple of them. Michael, what did you take from the weekend? Just give us a quick rundown.
I don't know. I mean, it's week to week. It's been so tough to know who's good and who's not, really. We're learning more and more about each team. I think the one thing that I come away with is, I'm from Kansas City, so I'm a Chiefs fan, and you think about how the NFL does things. Their playoffs are a little bit more expanded. Obviously, there's fewer teams, and so, just because a team loses, it doesn't mean they're completely out of it like in college football. So on one sense, I can think of a few teams that I think have hurt themselves by maybe the tougher schedules early on that they appear to look better. I think Ole Miss has looked a lot better than what they did early on. I think Georgia looks a lot worse than how well they did early on. I think Notre Dame I had in my top 4. I'm done. I'm done with them. We found out that their defense is really susceptible. Michigan State beat them. That ended up being, in my opinion, an overrated win, and Wisconsin ends up beating them on the road, which, thanks to their defense and some special teams. So I think we are constantly learning more about each team, but I almost feel like I almost kind of wish the first two games, and this kind of goes back to our ranking discussion, like Miami's ranked 14th, for instance. I'm a little surprised that they're that high. San Diego State's 19th, and they beat a Cal team that barely beat Texas, who I don't think maybe necessarily now is as good as what we thought. But again, all these thoughts are just, who's really separating themselves from the field. I think we've seen a few teams that are a lot better that already have 2 losses, where you're kind of thinking like, well, that's kind of a bummer because I think they may already be out of it. So more of the same, but try not to overreact.
You don't necessarily have to be a ranked team to have a good matchup. There's plenty of other games out there, but what we're seeing from the first couple weeks are just some really close, really hard-fought games, and just I felt like a lot of the games this last week were kind of larger margins of victory, or just weren't quite as close, or it didn't feel quite as close. That being said, as we kind of look at this, can either of you say you have a clear-cut number one team?
I would like to think that Louisville is number one. I have them as number one in my top 25. I had them as number one last week as well. They jumped really quick in my poll from being not even thought of to number one. I just think they've had, the best tests and done the best against those tests. You'll have to remind me their quarterback's name. I can't believe I forgot it. There we go.
Lamar Jackson.
He is ridiculous. And as long as he stays healthy, I don't think anyone's going to touch them at all. So to me, they're clear-cut number one. Alabama hasn't faced anyone significant. Ole Miss, yeah, but Ole Miss doesn't look as good as I thought they would be. Ohio State hasn't. I mean, they played Oklahoma, but Oklahoma also wasn't as good as we thought they would be. So, those are, my number 2, number 3. And then Michigan, I've got number 4. They also haven't really faced much. I do think Michigan is going to end up in the Final Four along with Louisville and who knows who else. But I would say Louisville's my number 1 pretty easily for me.
As I look at Louisville last week, they really struggled in the first quarter, but after that kind of settled down before halftime and in the third quarter. They go on to win 59-28, allowing 21 points in the fourth quarter, so you have to kind of look at that a little differently, being up either 52-7 or 59-7, depending on when they scored, and putting in their backups and allowing 21 points. I think you have to look at that a little differently, but Michael, is Louisville, in your opinion, the clear-cut number 1, or is there another team that can kind of fight for it?
From start to finish, Louisville deserves the number 1 ranking, just based off of margin of victory. They're in the top 10 on both sides of the ball as far as efficiency is concerned. One thing, this may be a little bit nitpicky. It's the same kind of deal with Notre Dame. Florida State's defense is not as good as people expected it to be. USF exposed them a little bit in the first half. Florida State found their footing and, eventually, really took hold of that game. I think Alabama, just based off of the sheer talent that they have, I know that they haven't been perfect, but that's what good teams do when they reload, is they don't necessarily start off the best or are always the most consistent. But I believe from top to bottom, they are one of the most talented teams in the country. I think Louisville's right up there with them. But again, as I said, Louisville beat out a Florida State team at home. I'm not sure if it was an anomaly or if that's what we expect, but I do think it provides a very interesting matchup this weekend against Clemson. And then the last point I'd like to make is, as the season progresses and these teams find their identities, I think home games are really going to determine a lot of outcomes within each conference. I'm very high on Wisconsin, but they are on the road against Michigan this weekend, and I would love to pick Wisconsin. I picked them last week. That upset worked out really nicely for me, but Michigan looked really physical last week against Penn State, and if this game was in any other place, I think I probably would still pick Wisconsin, but these home games, very strategic. I think it's going to be hard to pick against home games for me the rest of the season as these teams continue to find themselves.
You have a good point there with Louisville Clemson. Michigan Wisconsin is a big game, and whoever wins that game will obviously stay in the top four, if not higher. I guess my real thing here is between Louisville being a number one team. Is there any doubt in anyone's mind that maybe it's Alabama, Ohio State, or Michigan? Is it clear cut in your opinion, or are there three other teams that could vie for it?
Well, in my opinion, obviously you can't, say, oh, they're absolutely number one when they haven't faced each other. So that's hard for me to say. But looking at what we can see and what we do have, I think that they've proven themselves more than any of the other three teams. I mean, Michigan Michigan and Ohio State have to play each other at some point. Louisville plays Houston at some point. Plus, they play Clemson this week. So they all have tests coming up. It's all going to be big tests. With the way Louisville is destroying people, it reminds me of how Boise State used to play when they were in the WAC. People just couldn't touch them. And, obviously Boise State wasn't number one, but they were one of the best teams in the country consistently when they were doing that. So is it clear cut? No, but I'm absolutely leaning towards them as being the best team in the country this year. Now, that doesn't always translate to a national championship, so I'm not necessarily saying they're going to win, but I do think that they are the best team in the country right now.
Yeah, and if I went to if we had a next tier of four teams, just strictly they could kind of take those top teams through head-to-head matchups, I would definitely have to go with Wisconsin, Stanford. Who else would be in there for me? Houston would be in there for me, and gosh, I don't know who my fourth team would be. Clemson. Clemson would be my fourth. These are teams that they just haven't quite had the margin of victory that maybe you'd like to see. I think Wisconsin's probably right now the best of those four next teams, but again, the season will play out, and yeah, but clear cut wise, I think Alabama and Louisville are kind of 1A and 1B really.
How do you guys feel about Texas A&M?
Ooh,
They've got something left to prove, I think, in my opinion. Texas A&M has had some good wins over Arkansas, UCLA, but they struggled and beat Auburn only by 13 points. Yes, it was at Auburn. I mean, and it's not an easy place to play, but I think they've got the next 3 weeks for them will be big. They got South Carolina, then they play home against Tennessee, and then at Alabama. That'll show us a lot. I mean, I think they've got the ability to win those games. I expect them to drop one of those.
yeah, I like I like Texas A&M quite a bit. Actually, I've been thoroughly impressed. Their defense is much improved. They look like a much different team in years past when you felt like you could at least score with them, and maybe if you turned them over, you could win the game. But I've been very impressed with their defense, and traditionally that Arkansas game has been very, very tight. So for them to win by the margin they did, I was super impressed this weekend.
So I guess what I'm hearing out of this is don't go anywhere. The season's only going to get better.
Pretty much.
Well, let's jump into some quick picks. We got a couple quick picks for you, 5 of them, and then we'll go into 5 where we'll talk a little bit more about the game. Number 14, Miami against Georgia Tech. I believe it's at Georgia Tech this week. Michael, give us a quick pick, and if you have one quick thing to say.
Yeah, my quick pick will be Miami. And I believe that Miami's favored by 7, and they had a bye week last week, which I think just gives them more of an advantage against a triple option team that normally people don't have enough time to prepare for. So I think Miami's going to win this game, and I think they win it by more than a touchdown.
I think I'm going to pick Georgia Tech on this one. Miami hasn't really been tested a whole lot this year, and Georgia Tech looked pretty good and played fairly well against Clemson. Yeah, I know I said that it wasn't as close as the score showed, but it wasn't a blowout against, a top 5 team. So I go with Georgia Tech on this one. I like Miami. I like Brett Kaya. I don't know. I think Georgia Tech is better prepared And, the triple option's always tough no matter how much you prepare for it.
70-3, 38-10, 45-10. That's Miami's. That's Miami's victories. Now I will tell you it's over Florida Atlantic, Florida A&M, and Appalachian State, not in that order, but 45-10 at Appalachian State. And Tennessee struggled with Appalachian State. I think this is a much better team than anyone gives them credit for. And let's not forget Mark Richt. Mark Richt was at Georgia. He played Georgia Tech every year. I don't think that Miami's going to come into this game not knowing how to defend or being surprised. Now, I will say that Georgia and Georgia Tech always played a fairly close game. But I'm going to pick Miami, and I'm going to pick them by at least 17 points here.
Wow.
We got a little bit of an academy rivalry coming up now. We got Navy Air Force. The game's at Air Force. Marcus, how about you start us off?
I think this one's a toss-up for me. I only have two real toss-ups this week for me. I think it's going to be a tough game. Don't have a lot to say on it, but I just got to stick with the Mountain West fun and go with Air Force. It's more of a wishful thinking that Air Force can be undefeated when Boise State matches up with them in the last game of the regular season, have a top 25, top 20 matchup going into the conference championship and be a divisional championship game. So I think that would be fun for that. And so for that reason, I pick Air Force.
Yeah, I'm gonna take Air Force just because the game's on the road. I don't know very much about both teams, but Fort Collins is a very difficult place to play, so I'm gonna pick Air Force.
This is hard for me, Navy guy, so I want to pick Navy, but the game is at Air Force, and as you said, those people are looking for Air Force to kind of go undefeated, just to set up for some better games down the end of the season. As I look at this, you're right. Fort Collins is a tough place to play. Both teams have played very well of to date, and I'm going to go, I guess, with the upset here. I'll take Navy over Air Force. It's going to be a close game, though, 27-24 or 24-21, something like that. Very close game, played down to the end. Wake Forest and North Carolina State. This game is kind of tricky. Wake Forest is a team that right now nobody really knows who they are, what they are, but, undefeated. So is this Wake Forest team a top 25 potential team, or are they going to end the season with 5 wins?
In my opinion, I think Wake Forest is for real. I don't know if they'll have necessarily what it takes to compete with the upper echelon teams in the ACC. I'm going to pick them. I've seen bits and pieces of them this year, and maybe that's why I'm more comfortable picking them over NC State. But yeah, I'm going to go with Wake Forest to stay undefeated.
This is my other toss-up for the week. Looking at their schedule matchup so far, neither team has really been tested too much. NC State lost to East Carolina State, a Group of 5 team, but recently they've been one of the better Group of 5 teams. They got Ryan Finley as a quarterback. He had the starting position at Boise State. Whether or not he really was better than Brett Rippon to begin with last year is up for debate, but he did win the spot. So he's been playing fairly well over there. So I go with NC State on this one. I'd like to see Wake Forest win this and jump into the top 25. I think they're deserving of it. I wonder if they'll be able to handle NC State.
Yeah, this Demon Deacon team is one that I'd like to believe in. I just don't know if I can as of right now. That being said, yeah, no, I can't. NC State at home, I think is just a better team. I'd like to see Wake Forest, kind of make it back to the Orange Bowl like they did back in the day. But NC State, I think, is just the bigger, better team. Wake Forest proved me wrong, but I don't believe in you quite yet. Number 18, Utah is playing Cal. This is kind of a trap game, in my opinion. Cal can score a lot of points. Their defense isn't the best, but they can score a lot of points. Utah's defense is pretty good. Marcus, is Utah going to go down?
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's a trap game. I think Utah is going to be hard to beat, but I think it's going to be a good game. I do give it to Utah. It is, at Cal, which can be tricky. But I still give it to Utah. They played tough against BYU and USC. And yeah, Cal beat Texas, but I don't give them too much credit for that because I'm not as convinced on Texas as I was at the beginning of the season. Especially with how bad Notre Dame has been. Texas beating Notre Dame was what shot them into the top 25 and gave them all that credit, and then they lose to Cal. And so I don't know if Notre Dame, well, we've seen that Notre Dame isn't that great, so is Cal really that good when they also lost to San Diego State? San Diego State is good, but, is Cal just not as good? So I still go with Utah. I think they're on a roll right now. I don't think they're going to win the Pac-12 or even their division. Last year they shot up into the number 3 spot because they had an undefeated record, but then they quickly dropped, out of the top 20. So I think Utah will lose soon. I just don't think it's this game.
Yeah, I'm taking Cal. Cal's favored by 1.5. It's essentially a pick'em game, but this game is not in Salt Lake. I hope Utah, has learned from their struggles last year as far as being on the road, but I just think Cal can really put up points. They did lose last week to Arizona State, who is also undefeated. I really don't know what to make of Cal. I just know that they can score a lot of points, and I'm not sure if Utah can keep up with Cal. I do think that it will be a game of turnovers. If Utah can snag a few more, I think they can pull it out, but I'm picking Cal to win.
Yeah, I think you got the right idea there. It's a home game for Cal. Cal can score a bunch of points. Utah's defense is what's going to have to create turnovers and stops here, but I'll go with you. I'll take Cal. You seem to get a lot of games right last week, so I'll follow you and take Cal. And if you get this wrong, you can blame me.
Yeah,
you should be a leader, not a follower.
We've had a lot of contrarian picks already, guys, this week.
The Memphis Ole Miss game is our last one. Ole Miss had a pretty dominant win last week. They're playing at home against Memphis. Memphis dropped, I think, 70 points on their last opponent. Was that just because of their opponent, or is Memphis going to be able to give Ole Miss a run for their money?
I think that might have been their opponent. Memphis won this game last year, and they've blown out every team they've played this year. Ole Miss will want some revenge for losing to a group of 5 team. I think Memphis could keep up in the SEC, especially, compared to the weaker SEC teams. And I think they could keep up in the Big 12 as well. But I'm not convinced with Ole Miss anymore. I was pretty high on them to begin the season with. I thought they were going to be Alabama, and they didn't. I believe they lost to Florida State in the opener, and I'm not convinced on Florida State either. So I go with Memphis on this one. As much as, I would like them to lose to, boost Boise State or San Diego State's chances of getting the New Year's Six Bowl. But I still think Memphis is going to handle this one.
Yeah, this game is a Ryan McDonald special if I've ever seen one. Because to be honest, if you look at the stats on paper, this is very. Last week I had this, wrote it down. A&M. I had to switch it to A&M over Arkansas, even though I really would have liked to have picked Arkansas because. A&M put up points and they didn't give up a whole lot. Well, that's actually Memphis this year. If you look at Ole Miss, they're giving up 30 points a game. They're scoring 40. They're giving up over 400 yards a game. I know Ole Miss beat Georgia. I don't know how good Georgia is. I know they beat them fairly handily at home, but I'm picking Ole Miss to win this game, but the line is 14.5, which is an absolute joke. Like there's no way, in my opinion, Ole Miss is going to beat Memphis by 14.5. I expect them to win. But But gosh, this is a really sneaky matchup. Tyler Ferguson at Memphis has been extremely efficient, if not more. He's actually been more efficient than Chad Kelly at Ole Miss to date. And I actually don't think Bowling Green's that bad. Every time I hear Bowling Green, they're not that. I really don't think they're that bad of a football team, and they beat them 77-3. So I think it's a very sneaky game for Ole Miss.
Yeah, it is a sneaky game. I don't know what you mean by a Ryan McDonald special, but
these are the games I think you like to pick, the team that maybe not a lot of people would pick.
Yeah.
Am I right?
I know what you're saying. My numbers say that Memphis should have about a 47% chance on the road. I just don't know that they'll be able to pull this one out. Ole Miss has looked really good last week, and they're kind of maybe turning it around. Yeah, I gotta go with Ole Miss. I can't take Memphis. I gotta go with Ole Miss. I gotta go with Ole Miss. Sorry. I almost
betting
did
line.
Yeah,
14.5 points.
Michael.
I think he was baiting me into it. He was baiting me. He was telling me it's my special. It's what I like to do. I just can't. So. Anyways, now we got the longer ones, and more, I don't know why we call it short, quick, and long. None of them are quick, and none of them are really that long. But we got the 5 more marquee games of the week, starting with Friday night, Stanford, Washington, number 7, Stanford at 10, Washington.
I got to go with Washington on this one. For one, they're in Seattle, and Chris Peterson has a solid home game record. Yeah, most of that was at Boise State. But he is hard to beat when he's defending his own turf. Stanford, they're going to be tough, but Washington's on a roll right now, and I think they're just going to keep rolling. So I got to give them the edge, mostly just because it's at home.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Stanford in this game. We disagree again, Marcus. Here's.
I think we've only agreed on one of them.
So
Air Force.
So this is who Stanford has played thus far. They've played Kansas State. They've played UCLA. Have they played USC? They have played USC, right? They've played USC. Okay, they've beaten all those teams. Washington took an undefeated record going on the road against Arizona. I knew that game would be tight. Washington did win that game. Marcus, you're right. Chris Peterson's very tough to beat at home, but I have to take Stanford until they lose. I can't until they're dethroned. I'm not going to believe in Washington just yet. Now, if Washington wins, I'll definitely be riding that bandwagon. But I just think Stanford has been tested a lot more. But I do think in one sense, too, they could be beat up because they've played a tougher schedule. So I think this is going to be a really close game. Washington's favored by 3.5, but I'm going to go ahead and pick Stanford until they lose.
So here, I'm shaking my head because once again, guess who I'm going to go with on this one. As I look at the matchup here, Stanford only averages 25 points. Washington's been averaging 45. Yes, I understand the competition. Washington only gives up 14.5 points. Stanford gives up 12. That's fairly even. I think that some people have found a way to stop McCaffrey. UCLA did it, and he's been bottled up in a couple of them. That being said, the game is at Washington, not an easy place to play.
Yeah,
if Stanford gets by
fair.
this, they probably have a very good shot of going undefeated because after that, they've got Washington State, Notre Dame, Colorado, Arizona, Oregon State, Oregon, Cal, and Rice, none of which have showed and proved to be very good teams. This is a game that I think Stanford wins, but I'm going to take Washington.
Whoa.
All right. Not so fast, my friends.
Not so fast.
You've come to the good side.
Maybe the dark side, I'm not sure. Anyways, we're going to look at...
That's going to be a really close game. That is going to be a really close game.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that game. It should be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Tennessee... let me just finish that. If McCaffrey isn't stopped, Stanford wins. If McCaffrey is stopped, Washington wins.
Of course.
That's what it's down to. That's what it's down to.
Yeah.
So, 11 Tennessee against 25 Georgia. Georgia looked atrocious. Will they bounce back?
These are the games I love to pick against. The team that looked bad in Georgia, they're at home. Tennessee has started slow. We talked about this. during the games. Ryan made some very, very good points. Tennessee cannot start slow on the road against Georgia and expect to win. I don't care what Georgia has looked like. I don't care if they beat Mizzou by 1 point and they lost to Ole Miss by 30. The games at home, these games are very tough to steal. And you have to keep in mind, Tennessee's coming off of a victory that's emotional, okay, 11 years since they beat Florida, and B, an extremely physical game. So while I'm picking Tennessee, honestly, I hate this reason just for the hell of it. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Georgia won this game. I mean, Nick Chubb, his ankle is a little iffy right now. I think his health is a big time factor in this game. Tennessee might be catching a break there, but this is a very scary game if you're a Tennessee fan. I'm going to pick Tennessee, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if Georgia won.
I've been dogging on Tennessee all season. They're barely slipping by some of these weaker teams, but Georgia, like you said, not good. They've also been slipping by some weak teams, and then they, got handled last week. So Tennessee's finally giving me a reason to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I'm hoping that.
Be careful,
I'm
Marcus.
hoping that sounds nice to Michael's ears, but maybe because I've been picking against them and they keep winning, I'll pick for them and they lose. But Georgia's just horrible right now. So I go with Tennessee on this one just because they finally, proved themselves a little bit last week. So I'll get on this horse for now, but we'll see.
Fair enough.
Michael, I'm going to have you just predict which team I'm going to take.
Well, honestly, both teams haven't looked super spectacular. I'm going to say that you're going to pick Georgia.
I give Tennessee an 81% chance to win this game. I'm taking Georgia. That's all I am saying. I am not saying another word on this game.
It's a weird feeling. It's just one of those feelings I have where it's I just feel like Georgia's going to win, and I honestly can't tell you why. It's just a feeling. I don't know. I just kind of feel like.
I think the things are adding up. We've seen Georgia look good. I think Georgia played atrociously last week. They're going to bounce back, and I think Tennessee coming off of a comeback win against Florida where they snap a long streak, I just think it all adds up to a Georgia win on the road. Georgia at home. I just think it adds up to that.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going to pick Tennessee just to go with them, but, going on a very small branch.
Our next game we have here is North Carolina at 12, Florida State. North Carolina played Pittsburgh last week, scored in the final second of the game to win by 6, and Florida State struggled early, but kind of ran away with the game against South Florida, a team that I think, Marcus, you had South Florida in that game. That's what I was saying with Florida State. I think that what we're seeing hopefully this week in Georgia is what we saw last week in Florida State. Came off a bad loss and came back and took care of business. Will Florida State, stay on that same path, or do you think this North Carolina team can take them out?
I'm not convinced of Florida State this year. And North Carolina's only losses to Georgia. Yes, I just dogged on Georgia hardcore. But, it was the first game of the season. But UNC had a pretty good win. I mean, obviously it wasn't a big win, but it was a quality win over Pittsburgh, who's pretty solid this year. I think Florida State will win this, but I do pick North Carolina to pull it off in a close matchup.
This game reminds me actually a lot of the Clemson-Georgia Tech game last week. Florida State's favored by 10 points, and it just almost feels like one of those betting lines where Vegas is daring people to take the under. Initially, when I wrote this game down, I took Florida State to win simply because they're at home, and I felt like they've got a little bit of their mojo back against USF. North Carolina plays really tough football. I expect the game to be tighter than 10 points, but for whatever reason, I'm actually going to take the over 10 just because I think Vegas wants people to take the under. I think they win by 2 touchdowns or more, but I couldn't tell you a big reason why.
ESPN says that that North Carolina has a 19.6% chance to win this game. I say they have a 51% chance actually. It's a coin toss. I would look more at how the team has performed. I'm not looking too much into the future. Just kind of what they've done on offense, what they've done on defense, who they've played, where they've played. And that being said, I think North Carolina is probably the better team, but it is a coin toss. Because it's played on the road, I want to take Florida State here, but I'm going to actually go against that. I'm going to take North Carolina. 2 games left, both very, very highly ranked teams and prestigious matchups in a sense, actually. We'll start with number 8 Wisconsin at Michigan. This is what a lot of people are looking forward to. This is one of the 2 best games of the week, and it could go either way. Michael, is this a coin toss game, or do you think there's a clear-cut better team?
I think they're actually. Here's the thing. I told you guys last week I'm trusting my eyes in my pick of Wisconsin over Michigan State, and my eyes did not let me down. Well, I saw Michigan play a considerable amount of that game against Penn State, and my eyes are not going to deceive me on this one. Michigan State's going to win this game. I think Wisconsin's a very tough team. The line currently is 10.5. I actually think Wisconsin definitely covers that. This is going to be kind of a ground and pound, your classic Big Ten kind of matchup. But because the game is in Ann Arbor, I completely give the edge to Michigan, and I fully expect them to win this game.
I have Michigan in my Final Four. That's really all I have to say about this game. I'm not too convinced by Wisconsin. At least not convinced enough for them to beat Michigan at home. So yeah, I go with Michigan.
As I look at this game, I didn't think Wisconsin was going to win last week, to be honest. But I saw something in them that we haven't seen in a long time. A really good fight, and more than just a run game. They had the ability to pass the ball. And that's something that Wisconsin has struggled with in the past. They've always been known for a really good run game. But the fact that they had a second dimension that they could utilize is what makes them that much better of a team. This being a home game makes it very tough for Wisconsin. Sorry, a road game for Wisconsin makes it very tough to go to Ann Arbor to win. ESPN gives an 85% chance for Michigan. I think Michigan has a 94% chance, but it comes down to the first quarter. Michigan's kind of struggled in the first quarter. If they start slow, they're going to be in trouble. But I don't think this is a question in my mind that Michigan wins this game. Last game of the week, we've got Louisville and Clemson, probably the most anticipated game in the last 3 weeks. Ever since Louisville slapped Florida State around, this is the game that everyone has circled. And after this game, I'm not even sure what is the next game, on the schedule 2-3 weeks from now that everyone's looking forward to. This is the game that people have been waiting for, and this game has the ability to set up a spot in the college football playoff and possibly a national championship.
Yeah, I think, like you said, this is probably, the game to determine who's going to be in the Final Four between these two in the ACC. Louisville's my number 1 team right now. Like I said earlier, I think they've been tested. I think they've proven themselves worthy to be number 1. They're super solid, and I don't think anyone can handle them right now, not even Clemson. But it's awesome that we have a top 5 matchup, top 5 conference matchup even, this early on in the season. Either way, both of these teams are going to be top 10, maybe top 15 by the end of the year, guaranteed. Obviously, unless the loser loses another game. I think they're 2 solid teams, but I think Louisville's going to easily handle this one.
Yeah, this is a very, very, very tricky game. So Clemson is now the underdog at home, betting-wise and ranking-wise. I think that is a very awesome position to be in for Clemson. Look, Clemson looked like a team, and quite frankly, they did have a lot of pressure on them early on in the season. They didn't look very good. However, their defense has been the one thing that has remained constant in all of their victories. Their defense has really stepped up and kind of carried through the games where their offense wasn't clicking. It's really interesting. Clemson has a ridiculous amount of playmakers on offense, and I'm kind of sensing there's not really enough footballs to go around. I think Deshaun Watson has looked very, he just looks very unsure at times as far as where to go. And the defense, I think, is going to be there, something that I think they're going to be able to contain Lamar Jackson. But it's really funny. I kind of feel like if they can hold Louisville under 35, I think they've got a really good shot at winning the game. I am going to pick Clemson to win this game. Similar to Stanford, I think you got to beat the champ before I start getting on board. So I'm going to stick with Clemson. I think their defense is going to be fantastic. Keep in mind, their game was on Thursday. They've had more time to rest, which I think is great. They're going to need it against this kid. For no other reason than it being at home as well, I think that's a significant advantage for Clemson. I think Clemson wins. I'm just going to say it.
Marcus, you weren't around last year, but let me just say welcome to the Michael Clemson steam locomotive. He is a huge Clemson bandwagon. Not even a bandwagon. He's got a train. He's out of the gate. He's got the steam in there. This thing is not stopping for anyone.
Look, I'm leading the train, absolutely. But I must admit, they and keep in mind, the first 3-4 games last year are very similar to how they look this year. So the expectations were just ramped up this year. So who knows? Maybe they're right on track, guys. Maybe they're fooling us all.
I'm just giving you a hard time.
So.
I think Clemson is probably a little bit better than most people give them credit for. But I think Louisville, unless they just come in and completely, poop their pants.
Act like they've, haven't had a big game on the road thus far this season, which, by the way, this is the first tough game on the road.
This is Louisville's first game on the road? That would be incorrect. They've won at Syracuse.
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry.
It's
Syracuse,
okay.
You're right.
It's okay. That's why I'm here, man. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Most people forgot about Syracuse.
all my little fact checkers out there. Let's get our little fact checkers out there.
There you go.
A little presidential debate, reference for those who tuned in. But anyway.
I'm not even going to say anything there. I'm just going to move on. Louisville scored 70, 62, 63, and 59 points. They're averaging 63.5 points a game. I think if they even score 40, they probably win this because Clemson is struggling to even score 30. They scored 59 once, but they struggled against Georgia Tech. They struggled against Troy. Their defense is probably a little bit better than Louisville's, but when you're scoring 60 points a game, it doesn't really matter how bad your defense is if it's under 28 points, which is at 22.5 points average right now. Clemson, tough place to play, but I can't go against Louisville after what I saw against Florida State and just how explosive they were on all sides of the ball. I'll take Louisville. What was the spread in this one, Michael?
2 points. Louisville's favored by 2, so it's essentially a pick 'em.
Yeah, so with that being said, I'll make it a little bit more interesting, and I'll take Louisville by more than the pick 'em. I'll take them by at least a field goal. I think they probably win by a touchdown, if not more. So that wraps up our picks of the week, and now we get to jump into the upset. And the upset is where we all have a lot of fun. Michael's favorite part of the show.
Yeah, this is my favorite part of the show because I never pick true upsets, I'm okay with picking winners and losers, but, when I try to go to my betting lines...
Losers, guys. He just usually picks losers.
I usually pick I do pick losers, and they usually suck. So here's the loser that you guys should bet to cover, and that is Houston being 28.5 point favorites over UConn. So go ahead, guys. Put all your money on Houston because they're probably going to win by 56 points. So there's my pick of the week. I've got UConn losing by less than 4 touchdowns.
Take your
There you
piggy
have
bank,
it.
take your piggy bank, and go smash it because
Yeah.
that's probably a loser. I'm just kidding. I'm glad that you're a good
I
sport
mean, you
about
could
this.
parlay all of my losers together at the end of the season. You could probably make $100,000 off of every single quote unquote upset bet pick that I've made thus far. So
Hey, you know what?
here's another one for you guys out there.
We appreciate it. We just wouldn't. We don't know what we do without you.
The contrarian.
I'm going to take it one step further, and I'm actually, unlikely, but I'm going to pick UConn over Houston. UConn hasn't,
Dark
UConn
side.
hasn't
This is a
really
very
played.
dark side.
UConn hasn't really played much this year yet. But if you look at Houston's schedule, they beat Oklahoma by 10. But that was in Houston, kind of, whatever. But Oklahoma has proven to not be super solid. Then they played
wasn't
Lamar also at home, 42-0. But who's Lamar anyway?
I think he lives down the street.
Lamar Headley, Blazing Saddles, anyone? And then they played at Cincinnati, and Cincinnati played them tough for a while, and then they pulled away, and then they played at Texas State, which it's Texas State. So is Houston really as good as their numbers are looking? I don't know. It's a conference game. UConn's been fairly decent lately. So my upset is going to be UConn over Houston.
Woo.
UConn is 2-2
not gonna
with
happen.
a 3-point win over Maine and a 3-point win over Virginia. They're 6 points from being 0-4.
I do know that.
Hey, Maine's really good.
Yeah,
Hey,
they're lobster. Okay. I did struggle to find an upset alert, guys, but listen here. I got both of them right last week. I had Colorado beating Oregon, and I had Pittsburgh against North Carolina. Pittsburgh was +7. They finished the game losing by 6, so it was a close one. They almost won the game, but the last second touchdown. That being said, I did get both of them right. I'm going to pick against Oregon again this week. I'm going to take Washington State to beat Oregon.
I like that pick.
I just like the passing attack that Washington State has, and I don't think Oregon is nearly what they were 2, 3, 4 years ago.
You mean since they're, Chip Kelly's players are no longer under Mike Helfrich?
Well, even last year,
Mark? Is it Mark?
Yeah. And then I've got one other, since I always kind of, try and pick two. I'm going to stay in the same conference, and this is the worst team out there, USC.
They really are. That's fair.
They're 10-point favorites at home against Arizona State. Arizona State can score a ton of points. Yeah, their defense isn't the best, but regardless, I just don't think Arizona State loses by 10 points. If Arizona State wins this game, there's a reasonable chance that USC will be looking for a new coach and enter Les Miles, I guess. And that would be scary.
I was just going to say that.
Knowing that you've got Peterson, you've got possibility then of Les Miles, you've got David Shaw, which who knows how long he'll stay around.
You think Coach Pete would leave Washington?
I don't know. I think.
He
Coach
looked
Pete's
at it before, didn't he?
I think he's pretty happy there.
Yeah.
But you got Helfrich, you got Peterson, you've got Shaw, you've got Jim Mora Jr. If you brought in Les Miles, they're gonna start competing with the Big Ten even more for the best conference. And I honestly say that I think the SEC is on a little bit of a down. They still have the two or three top teams, but other than that, the rest of the conference isn't quite as good. But I will take Arizona State +10. I'm not saying they're going to win the game. I just don't think they'll lose by 2 scores. So
I like that pick.
That's our podcast for the week, guys. Hope you enjoyed the week. We thank you for tuning in. Please leave us comments. Check out the website. Check out our game predictor as the games are going on. We'll have our poll out on Sunday morning. And if there's anything, just hit us up. Michael, Marcus, thanks for joining me again. And have a good weekend.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.